There it is. Okay. Well, thank you so much, John, for doing this.
Yes.
I have known, I feel like for a year, is it almost a year? I feel like
More than
it's
that,
been,
nearly 2 years we've been talking on and off, I
oh my
think.
God, that's
I know.
crazy.
I know.
I met you through the internet.
Uh,
And people think on my side of the world, in my little community, people think that's weird. And I'm like, no, you meet the coolest people online. They're like, yeah, back in the day, we wouldn't do that. We don't meet people online. And I'm like, well, y'all are missing out on some cool people. But I did meet John a long time ago, and he's just has become one of my very good friends. And I feel like John is just so wise. Every conversation I have with this man is just my brain every time. He pushes my limits when it comes to my understanding to things. As I was completing my grad program as an IO, I learned so much from various perspectives and seeing things from different ways and thinking about them in different formats. So, John, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself, and then we'll let the people know why we're here and what we're doing today.
Why, thank you. Uh, it's very kind of you, and very kind of you to say nice things. Um, okay, my name's John Britton. I'm calling in from the remote wilds of the Republic of Ireland. I moved here 3 years ago after living in England for some years, and before that I was in Australia for a bit, and before that I was back in England for a bit. So I've been around. And I know nothing about IO. I'm sorry to disappoint you. It's not my field at all. In fact, my field for 30 years has been as a actor, improviser, with a specialist in training ensemble, physical ensemble, dance and theatre and circus. And what does that mean? It means enabling people to work at the most instinctive level, often spontaneously, often without pre-planning, to work effectively and spontaneously at the deepest possible level to achieve a common outcome, often while being watched. So under the public pressure of having to deliver. Now, I got fascinated by ensemble. The first book I wrote, which was, I happen to have it because I'm writing another book at the moment. I was quoting from it, but it's called Encountering Ensemble. That was the first book I wrote. What is ensemble? And as I began to dig into what ensemble is and how we train ensemble, I began to realize that its most perfect and fundamental set of understandings for how to build organizations, how to build communities, how to facilitate activism, how to facilitate humane and personal working environments. And I developed my own process of training called Self with Others. That's how I train people. I taught people all around the world. I taught in America often enough. I taught a lot in India and around China and South America and all over Europe and all of the rest of it. And increasingly, I began to think of Self with Others as something which was not relevant only to performers. Even though I worked physically with people, the ideas behind Self with Others were universal ideas. In other words, how do we each excel and be brilliant while also being in absolute service of a collective endeavor? Sometimes people think that, collective work is about deprioritizing the individual. Nonsense. A great organization empowers great individuals to work together. In fact, so much so, I increasingly talk about the self not as an isolated self, but as an interconnected self. Our greatest self doesn't stop at our skin. It is a process of interconnection with the world around us. So I began to work Self with Others in corporate environments, community development environments, educational environments, activist environments. ended up going to China and doing some really interesting work with very senior people in China. And then I had a heart attack. And then I burnt out. And then I had a complete breakdown. And then the pandemic wiped out the remnants of my career. So, suddenly you go, right, now is the time to put this stuff actually into effect. I had been traveling constantly for decades. I was an academic for a bit of that, but most of the time I was traveling constantly. I don't want to travel anymore. I want to be at home. I want to write books. I want to grow trees in my garden. This is, my big work in my life now is I'm growing a forest. And, that's as important to me as anything I've ever done in my life. But now self with others has to serve me as a way of living. And the way it will serve me as a way of living is by being able to serve others, as helping them find more effective ways to deliver what they need to deliver, whether that's managers, whether that's workers, whether that's teachers. I still work with artists, but my focus now is on self with others as a process for enabling groups to thrive and for individuals to live healthily within thriving groups. So that's a slightly long-winded introduction to me. I pass it over to Gaby.
I love it because you're like, I know nothing about IO, and then proceeds to just explain IO in a beautiful way. So IO, and I love every time you explain and sample because it resonates so much with what we do as IOs, the work that we always strive to do, whether it's training and development or change management or organizational development, whatever it is that we do under that umbrella of IO, there's always this need to understand and work with humans towards a common goal. Usually it's organizational safety, organizational health, wellness, whatever the goal may be. There's always this idea that we should all do it together. It's never, well, one person can go fix it all. So one of the reasons why I felt like you were perfect for this group was because I feel like sometimes we can become too focused on the academics and the literature and the research and just all of these bigger concepts and forget that when we get out and we graduate and we get the jobs, we're going to be working with other human beings who are just as complex and have all of these backgrounds just like we do and experiences, right? So tell them, I really want you to share with the group about self with others and how we can use that as we do the work. And side note, I feel like self with others can be implemented in every field, doing anything. I mean, we can do that at work, we can do that at home. I know I went through some of, now I can't remember what I did when you were sending out the emails and you were having us think about the questions. And it really changes the way that you perceive what you see when you interact with somebody. You're thinking about things in a different way. We're not just so black and white. IO is not black and white at all. It's like the gray world of psychology, I feel like. And yeah, I can tell me if I'm wrong, but sometimes it feels like that. Like we have an answer for millions of answers for one question. So anyway, I feel like I'm rambling. So tell me about self with others. Help us kind of understand that concept a little bit. And remember, you guys are more than welcome to write your questions down and we'll answer them as we go or just jump in the conversation. Okay. John,
okay.
back.
Cool. I want to be careful in not just pouring information out, because after about 2 minutes of information, the brain shuts down and goes, enough information. So I'm going to give just a really the clearest, simplest sort of outline I can. And if you want to know more, I have, free resources as well as other resources that you can access if you want to dig into this more. But I'm just going to give the broadest shape of what self with others is. Now, if you're going to train a performer to be fearlessly brilliant under the pressure of being watched by an audience, you need to make sure that you are training every aspect of that performer. So I had to develop what I call a 360-degree way of being. Too often in coach, I mean, I'm mainly a coach now, but in coaching and such work, too often you have a personal development coach who will say, it's all about, look inside, change your mindset. You can have anything you want. It's all inside. Sometimes problems are not inside. Sometimes problems are external to you. Sometimes you get people who go, reorganize the system, look outward. Sometimes problems aren't outward. Sometimes problems or blockages are internal. So for a 360-degree perspective, I suggest that we always approach any question from 3 angles. The first angle, I call them the 3 domains that we explore. The first domain is, I call it inner work. Knowing yourself. What are you bringing to a situation? And that's, of course, knowing your thoughts, knowing your assumptions, knowing your prejudices, knowing the ways, the self-story you have, knowing the lens through which you see the world, your politics, your ideology. It's also doing the work to know your emotions, your triggers, your blind spots. It's also doing the work to be able to notice your body and go, oh, interesting, I seem to be holding tension in my shoulders. Maybe if I relax my shoulders, this situation won't feel quite so challenging. Inner work is spending time, and this is a lifelong job, spending time really getting to know the workings of your body-mind. Because whenever you approach any situation, it is you who is approaching the situation. You are bringing yourself to a situation, and if you do not know yourself to the best of your ability, you're lacking information about the situation. So the first domain I talk about is inner work. The second domain I talk about is observe connection. What is connecting with what? And how is it connecting? In a given situation, who is connecting with whom? What are the connections? How are they connecting? If you come into a situation and you're feeling a little bit tense by it, ask yourself, what is connecting internally? Why is this person saying something which is actually connecting with the memory of something that somebody else said something before? What are the connections? What is the nature of the relationships that exist internally and externally in any situation? That's the domain of connectedness. And the third domain that we look at is systems, drawing very strongly on systems theory and complexity theory. We say, where do outputs map onto inputs? Where do inputs map onto outputs? What is emerging from this situation, which is an unintended consequence of the situation? How is perhaps the situation or the environment tending to lead people towards certain sorts of outcomes, even though it thinks it wants to lead people towards other kinds of outcomes? Because sometimes the problem in any situation is just the system is set up wrong. And you can do all the personal development you want. If the system is set up wrong, you're still going to get inappropriate or unsatisfactory outcomes. But there again, if the system is set up well, but people do not do the personal development work necessary to bring themselves open-heartedly and fearlessly to that situation, the circumstances are going to get corrupted by people's prejudices, assumptions, fears, childhood memories, whatever, And even if everyone's done their inner work and the system's set up well, if the quality of connections between people and people's ability to connect with themselves is not valued and nurtured, then basic communication doesn't happen. And without communication, any situation will fall to pieces. So this is the broadest outline. In each of those areas, I work with different questions that we'll ask people, but I won't go there because that's information overload. We can go to that later if you want. But for now, the 360-degree approach for me can be put simply like this. What is happening inside of you? What and how are you connecting with, and what is connecting with you? And what is the structure of the system within which all of this is happening? And that can be in a business, it can be in an educational environment, it can be in a family, it can be in a community group, it can be in a political organization. It's universal because it's about what happens when people connect. That's a rough outline of Self with Others.
I think, first of all, wow. Every time I hear this, man, I feel like it's really interesting because, one, it's making you think about the work that we all expect other people to do. And I think I've mentioned this to you a couple of times. When we get on LinkedIn, what is the first thing we see? Leaders must blah, 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 blah. Leaders need to be more blah, blah, blah. Like, there's always this need for somebody else to be what we need them to be, especially online. And then when we're talking about connections, I feel like right now, even though we have the ability to connect more with the internet, with cars, with transportation, it almost feels like it's more lonely. There's been studies done about that. Right now there's a lot of conversation online about that connectedness. How connected are we really? I was just reading a book the other day, and the author spoke about, I have hundreds of friends online, but none of them can feed my cat. So there's this connection from human interaction that's happening in this very connected world. I don't know if that makes any sense. So I love that that's a part of that concept that you're working with. And then the systems, I feel like as IOs, that's all we look at, the system in itself. We look at the bigger picture and how it really is functioning. So there's all of these different things that when we look at them individually, there's so much work to do. There's so much we can do. And like you said, at the individual level and while we're working with other people. So how do you think someone can start breaking down some of this information or stepping into these ideas of, okay, wait a minute, now I have to do this work, this inner work, but also I have to graduate and I have to pay the bills and I have to still be a functional member of society. So how do you think people can balance? Because this is really deep philosophical. Is that the right word? You know the word. This is really a lot to think about.
Yeah,
and it can feel
it's way too much to think about. It's way too much to think about. Don't even try. Start from this. You're a human. You're just a brilliant, gorgeous, amazing, flawed human. And so's everybody else. And we are never going to get it right because right doesn't exist. There is no right way to be you. There is no right way to be me. There's no right way to be an organization. There's better and worse, but there's not right and wrong. Better and worse is a spectrum. Right and wrong is a binary. We get caught up in this obsession with trying to get things right rather than getting curious about tasting what it's like to be you in this room right now and deciding what you want to add to that. Think of it as cooking. There you are, you're in a room and you go, okay, there's something not right working in this room. I'm curious, what is it? Did I not get enough sleep last night? Did I eat badly? Is somebody else bringing in an attitude? Is it the noise from the air conditioner that's putting everybody on edge? So it's a constant process of curious inquiry, coupled by a human process of acceptance. I mean, I think we go to very, very big questions. Western culture over the last 3,000 years, but particularly over the last 400 years, has created this, well, two things. First of all, the story of separation, that we are all separate from each other and everything is separate from everything else. Humans are separate from nature. This is separate to that. I'm separate to you. It's simply not true. It's not supportable under any actual way of thinking. We're all intimately interconnected all of the time. But it's also created this sense that we grow up with of having to achieve, as if what we need is out there and we have to pull towards it. And that's constantly stressful. And I would suggest that a healthy way of growing, I'm not saying don't grow, I'm saying grow, but a healthy way of growing is to say, this is how it is right now. This is who I am right now. This is how I feel right now. This is how things are working right now. That's curious. How could we make this a bit better? In other words, start from what is instead of starting from what isn't. So much of the time when we think about improvement, we start from what isn't. This isn't working. This system isn't in place. This leader isn't doing this thing. Yeah, I know. There's a million things that aren't. But there's something that is. And what is your experience of being yourself in this room right now. Engage with curiosity with that and see what that information begins to tell you. Then over time, notice patterns. Yeah, this person is always fine until they, in a meeting, they somehow feel that they're being criticized and then they get really defensive. You don't know that happens, but it's a pattern that you notice. And as you begin to notice patterns, you can begin to find ways to challenge and change and break those patterns. Notice them in yourself. I always get upset when so-and-so says this, not when so-and-so says it, but that other person. Why? Yeah, maybe that person reminds me of, someone else or whatever. Curiosity and information gathering every day can be a fact-finding mission. And people might go, oh, yeah, but we've got to get results. Hey, the quickest way to get results is to work with what is. The quickest way to get results is to stop indulging in fantasies about how the world should be different and go, okay, what is happening in this room? Who am I in this room right now? How can that be done better? That's the quickest way of getting results and the healthiest way of getting results, because you are behaving like a human and one hopes treating other people like a human. And if you don't treat people like humans, the system is going to fall to pieces at some point. Either your internal system, and I know I burnt out 5 years ago. My internal system fell to pieces because I drove myself towards this vision of success founded on perfectly unresolved childhood trauma, which I was pretty certain I could get through life without having to look at. Just another 30 years, I'll die without having to look at it. But that stuff comes around and kicks you in the ass. So if you don't treat yourself or other people like a beautiful, flawed, functioning human, you are not at first base. And I don't care what decisions you come to, they will not probably be good decisions.
I'm really glad you mentioned that part, because I feel like as we transition out from the academic world, or even as we're transitioning into different phases, from young adult to adulthood, or just different phases of life, we tend to have preconceived ideas of what success should look like. I mean, from coming from school, stepping into the workplace, we may think that we need to climb the ladder or fix every organization or tell everybody how to, fix their whatever so they can have a healthier, happier workplace. Or I hear, so you touched on a lot of the consulting school of thought, letting people understand that. And you reminded me of humble inquiry. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Edgar Schein, letting people and yourself understand that the answers are within you. That's the heart of consulting, right? We don't go and tell people what to do. We all work together because we already know how to do that. But as you're saying, in a very human way. You touched a little bit on that, on the therapeutic world, on the clinician world. Acknowledging that we all have experiences, we've all been through things, and we can't outrun our past. So understanding how that shows up as professionals, as persons just interacting with other people, that's going to be key in making sure that you're overcoming challenges that come your way in the academic world, in the workplace, and just really in life. And then you touched a little bit on the growth. That's just continuous and never, ever, ever stops. And we can either fight it or we can be open to it. Either way, it's going to be hard. So
I want to challenge one piece of language that you use, not the thought, but one piece of language, because I think it reveals one of the metaphors that we live by, and the metaphors that we live by matter because they're the way we see the world. You said that we can outrun our past, and I really get what you mean by that, and I agree with what you mean by that. But the metaphor is that go faster, work harder. When I'm coaching people, or if were I to be consulting in an organization, I would never suggest outrunning. I would always suggest slowing down and doing less, opening up space really to notice and then make a decision what baggage from the past you choose to put down. So always slow down and lighten the load rather than speed up and increase the work, level. There's something that this is a very basic physical thing that often, you'd see people who have tense shoulders and you go, your shoulders are tense. It's when I was training performance, your shoulders are tense. And I go, okay. And they relax their shoulders. Or they go, yeah, okay. And they shake around. And I go, that's not relaxing your shoulders. That's tensing your shoulders. That's putting a lot of effort into your shoulders. If you have tense shoulders, it's because somewhere in your head, in your unconscious, you are thinking tension, tense thoughts. The tense shoulders come from thinking tension. If you want to stop having tense shoulders, the most efficient way to do it is to stop thinking tense thoughts. In other words, progress comes by doing less, by stopping something rather than doing more. Often people go, yeah, I push my shoulders down now. I go, great. Now you're thinking, push my shoulders up and push my shoulders down. You've got two thoughts going at once. No wonder you're exhausted. The relaxed and efficient way of working for all of us is to learn to do less. To just go, yeah, I've been doing this. Don't need to do that anymore. Stopped. Finished that now. I'm going to focus on this now. Yep, that email needs answering. It needs answering tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. Okay. Not thinking about it anymore. It's gone. So the metaphor, and it's really powerful that you use it, but particularly for people who are merging out of education or trying to climb the career ladder, is this metaphor of striving and achieving. And I feel passionately that we need to rediscover what Indigenous peoples have always known. But, in westernized cultures, we've forgotten that real growth comes in stillness, comes in the sharing of stories, comes in the observation of other people, as well as doing all the stuff you have to do to put food on your table as well. But that the centrality of rest and pause and stopping, we've forgotten it in the West. I'm passionate. First thing I'd ever do with a coaching client is, let's review the situation. Let's see what you want to talk about. And then I'll encourage them to stop thinking so quickly. And we'll slow the pace down a bit. And then I'll start asking, what do you think you could stop doing? What do you fill your time up with that isn't necessary anymore? The root metaphor. I was actually reading a Native American scholar this morning who uses the phrase root metaphor, the metaphor from which we actually live, needs not to be one of achievement, but needs to be one of observation and curiosity. So I don't want to outrun anything. I want to just put down the heavy bags so that I can run more lightly.
I love that. As you were talking about that, I was thinking, well, you already set up yourself for failure if that's what we're doing, because the past will always be in the past, and you can't. If we get into those, we'll go down a rabbit hole that,
Yeah,
But no, I like that, and I think it's important also to understand that all of these things that you're bringing to the table do need to be digested slowly. We do need to think about all this comes very slowly, and I know we've had conversations every now and then, and we don't for a little bit, because in my mind, I feel like I hear your ideas and your thoughts, and it is something that needs to be understood and processed and then applied very slowly, so you can see what works and what doesn't work.
But of course, in a professional situation like you and all of us are, sometimes decisions have to be made, and they have to be made quickly. There's a difference between the decision-making process and the imagination process. In other words, when we're thinking about what to do and we're curious and reflecting and we're learning, there are no binaries. There's all sorts of possibilities. We could do this, and notice this, and that. But sometimes a decision has to be made, and the decision is always either yes or no, this or that. Change this, don't change this. Employ this person, don't employ this. But, decisions are binary. You take one path, and therefore you don't take other paths. I would encourage us, if we are in positions of responsibility or we're putting in place structures for other people to work in, that when a decision has to be made, don't make the decision until it has to be made, but when a decision has to be made, make it, but always be willing to reflect, to observe how the new system that you've put in place might be creating unintended consequences. Always be willing to ask others how they are experiencing your decision, because they may well have experiences of your decision that you just never conceived of. You go, oh, well, I didn't mean that at all. And always be willing that if you walk over a bridge, you go, okay, I'm going to walk over this bridge. This is the decision I make. You can always turn around and walk back again. You can always go, yeah, I tried that decision. It didn't work. Or it worked in one way, but there were unintended consequences. Or it could have been a good decision, but for these people at this time, it's not a good decision because there are other things they need, or whatever. And to have the humility, if you're the person who makes a decision, to reflect, and if necessary, walk backwards and go, yeah, I don't always get things right. And certainly if I'm in a managerial position, when I used to run productions, quite large productions, I made mistakes. And I created an environment where everybody else could make mistakes, but everyone who made mistakes was expected to own their mistakes and take responsibility and to sort of say, okay, I made a mistake, I'll fix it. If I make a mistake, I take responsibility and I fix it. to the best of my ability. So the decision making is binary, but the conceptual process is within the spectrum of better, worse, more or less appropriate, more or less expensive. There's all sorts of spectrums that we work with. Where do you want to put yourself on a spectrum as you conceive of change? But a decision is a binary. Dum, dum, there we go. Yes or no, right, left, whatever.
I want to read some of these comments, Diana. You said this is very aligned with self-determination theory, and that we have basic human needs of relatedness, autonomy, and competence. That is so true. And isn't it cool to hear, learn about theories and theoretical approaches, and then to see it in real life, and you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I think what really stuck out to me as you were speaking, Dan, is that you center relatedness. So it relates to self-determination theory, but you're kind of centering around how we connect with others to increase our own doing, which is a really interesting take on that whole paradigm. So I appreciate what you're sharing. This is great.
Beautiful, thank you. Maybe I'm interested just to pick up very briefly on that word relatedness, because I'm currently writing a new book, which is doing my head in because it's way too difficult for me, and I'm trying to bang my head against the ideas. My fundamental sense is that our entire experience of life is relationship between one thing and another, externally and internally. I am in relationship with my body. I am in relationship with my emotions. I am in relationship with the thought. I'm in relationship with the pain in my stomach because I haven't eaten properly. It's always relationships. The only time that we're not in relationship is when we're either unconscious or in non-dream sleep. And then essentially you cease existing. You have no sense of yourself unless you are in relationship. So if life is actually experienced always in relationship, then looking at relationships, inner work, connectedness, and systems, looking at how things relate to each other is the absolute building block of any effective change and any effective humanizing process. So, what is relating to what here, and how is it relating? So I'm really interested in your word relatedness, because it feels to me, increasingly as I do the research on this new book, increasingly it feels like the word that we have forgotten, again, in Western thinking, because Western thinking at its heart is about separation. The Western scientific method is break things apart, take something, break it to pieces, look at all the pieces, and then wonder why it doesn't work anymore. We're taught that we're all absolute individuals separate from everybody else. It just isn't true. So thank you for the word, and I've never heard of self-determination theory. So I'm really interested to go and take a look at that, and I thank you for it.
Yeah, thank you, because you really, like I said, you're centering that part of it. And I just, in reading it and studying that theory, that's what jumped out to me as almost being the most important element of why we do the things we do, just to connect with others and feel that sense of belonging, like in organizations, our personal lives, school, everything. So it's really interesting what you're saying.
Cam said, I'm finding this very freeing as I'm stressing out which brand of IO to go into. If I choose wrong, I can always change. Oh my gosh. I'm going to let you take that one, John, and then I have something to add as well.
Yeah, it's Cam, so utterly, utterly true. And I would take it a step further and say, you can't choose wrong. Just choose and experience, and if it doesn't suit you, use what you have learned from your first choice to leverage your second choice. In other words, if you're in strand A and you decide you want to be in strand B, when you go into strand B, you will have knowledge of strand A that most people in strand B don't have. Everything you do, if you approach it with curiosity, becomes information that you can then use in service of others. Yeah, there are material costs, you might need to retrain and so on. But those material costs, though important, are external, and generally you will make them back because you will be bringing in a higher level of experience and competence than many other people because you have a broader range of experiences. So the very thought of getting it wrong is a destructive thought, and it will sort of paralyze you as you try to make decisions. Instead, I would say, what do you think most excites you? And go for it. And if after a year you go, oh, this isn't as exciting as I thought, brilliant, you've got a year's experience, and you also know something you don't have to spend the rest of your life doing. So you make the next choice. And I would, let it be fueled not by fear of getting it wrong, but by excitement of what you're going to discover when you make the choice.
I love that, because I feel like we've talked about that maybe every single group that we've been here at. It always comes up. What if I don't pick the right thing, or I don't have the right background? And I love that it always comes up, because it's true. It doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter if we're waiting tables right now. It doesn't matter if we're babysitting. Like, it doesn't matter what we do. When we have the right mentality and the right, it's not a framework. When we have the right mentality about what we're doing, you can learn so much. So I'm just I guess I'm just repeating what you're saying, John. Anything we do, we can take so much from it. Anything. And I know, looking back from all of the random jobs I've ever taken, so a lot of the random things I've ever committed myself to, I feel like all of that led me to a position where I am today that feels good, that I'm happy with. And if it wasn't for all of those things that I felt were a waste of time or didn't really align with the career plan, all of those things taught me so much, so much. Like, there was some time I was doing some business things that I was like, I'm not a business person. And now I'm using a lot of those things that I was like, oh, maybe I'm not an expert. Maybe I don't know everything about that specific concept or idea, but I can say I'm familiar. So even if you choose whatever it is that you choose, I don't think you can ever choose wrong. You may just choose something that you're like, you know what? I did that. Thank you very much. Let's pivot, because that's what we're going to do for the rest of our lives. Pivot.
And there's a tougher side to that as well. I agree absolutely with what you're saying, Gabby. There's a tougher side to that as well, which is part of our inner work, which is, over time, as we attempt to know ourselves better and align more and more with the sense of the sort of person we want to be in the world, I think most of us have things that we look back on and go, I wish this had been different, or, I wish that hadn't happened to me. I certainly do. For me, the major one was I was, many years of being badly bullied at school. I wish that hadn't happened. Of course I do. But over the gentle process of deeper and deeper acceptance of our own humanity, we can come to see even those things that we wish hadn't happened, or those parts of ourselves that perhaps we're not proud of or even ashamed of. We can see those things as integral to who we are, and therefore to what we have to offer. There's a beautiful quote from the poet Rilke, who says something like, all the devils in you are just angels waiting to be loved. all those bits of you that you go, I hate that about myself, or I wish that wasn't there, are bits of you that if you can offer them kindness and acceptance will become angels for you. And the same is true in how we view other people. This really annoys me about that person. Can you step back and breathe and look for the good in the very thing that upsets you? Now, this is deep level work and not something you do when you're just going into a company for a couple of weeks. This is the deep work. This is the work of true creation of systems where humans can thrive. Because in the end, there's creating systems which don't destroy people. That's a pretty good outcome for any input to a company. Well done, we now have a company that doesn't actually burn people out and destroy them, and people aren't going home crying at the end of the week. Well, if most companies could achieve that, we'd be happy. Many don't. But then, of course, there is, you set up your own company, or perhaps within your own family, or, your community, that whatever you're active in, and so on. That ability towards genuine, radical self-acceptance and genuine, radical acceptance of others. Not only accepting the bits of yourself you like and the bits of other people that you like, but the real human thing of going, we're all flawed. We're all amazing. We're all extraordinary. Even the people who really annoy me, they're amazing and extraordinary. Can we work from that place of acceptance? Now that's lifelong work. Because as you get older, things change and you begin to regret them. I just turned 60, and oh my God, everything's falling to pieces. It's a process of acceptance, continual.
I'm gonna let that one sink in. And I think that's the beauty of it all, that underneath the work that we do and the field that we've decided to go into. And I feel like anything we do in life, there's that. We have to accept and be open to the changes that come, because like I said at the beginning, we will experience a transition in phases of life and where we stand and what we think. And I think kind of goes back to what you brought up, that fear of like, or that stress of, what if I don't choose the right thing? Well, later in a couple of years from now, you're going to be in a different space of frame of mind where you're going to be like, you know what, maybe it was the right decision. And I think it's done what it needed to do. And then we got to move on. And that happens in every aspect of our lives. And it is a lifelong life commitment, because I am personally not very good with change. I fight it. And I know it's good. And I know I'm not supposed to. And I know this about myself. But now we're friends. Now it's like, change, here it comes. Oh, well, it's going to make me uncomfortable. Well, whatever. And it's a process. And now it's not uncomfortable and hideous. Now it's like, all right, it's here. Let's take some tea.
And the fact that you fight change perhaps prevents you from just following a whim all the time. Oh, I'll do this, oh, I'll do that. That makes you perhaps more reflective and thoughtful. Maybe your resistance to change is a strength.
It's something.
Yeah.
It's something. I know I stopped not doing things. Now I do them scared and stressed, but they get done. And more often than not, I'm like grateful. I feel grateful after. But I don't want to take away from our actionable steps. Towards the end of the call, I always ask our speakers to give us some actionable steps so we can practice. Used to be for the 2 weeks. Now we're doing this monthly. So what do you think we should work on while we meet the next one?
I would suggest a couple of areas where it always repays us to pay some attention. The first is when you encounter something which is problematic or perturbing you, or if you're in a work environment and you are responsible for making changes or suggesting changes, always be willing to pause and observe it from those three angles. Ask, what are you bringing to the moment or the situation? And the key thing that you're bringing usually is assumptions. What assumptions are you bringing to a situation? They may be healthy or unhealthy assumptions, useful or not useful, but notice them. Secondly, ask yourself, what is the network of connectedness or relationship within this situation? So what is connecting with what here? And that can be internal as well. What am I connecting with internally? And thirdly, what is the system that this situation is operating within? Before you try to make any decisions about anything, even if you've only got 20 seconds, do a quick scan of what you're bringing in, a quick scan of what is connecting to what, and a quick scan of the system. Power dynamics, hierarchies, environment something's happening in, national news situation, whatever. Always be aware of the context, be aware of the connections, be aware of your own assumptions. That's something that I think is a really useful mental discipline for all of us all of the time. Just come in and go, as soon as you go, yeah, this person's the problem, just pause. Is it, or is that system making that person more likely to do that? Is it the system that's the problem? Is this person not a problem, but you're bringing in assumptions that this person is a problem because they trigger you in some way? Always, always, always just pause and look from those three angles. What are you bringing in? What is connecting with what? And what is the system? So I think that's really useful. It's a continual working process for me. Even though most of my work is a lot of my work is online, like this, coaching people and so on. The other thing I think is endlessly useful to us is pay attention to what you pay attention to. We live in a culture of distraction, of multitasking, of always trying to do too many things at once. Learn to observe what you're paying attention to. Another way of saying that is be present with what you're doing. Don't sort of go, I've just got to do this, I've got to do that. There's a television on in the background. I'll just do that in a minute. I'll just answer that email. It's no good for you. It's exhausting and it's inefficient and it doesn't lead to good outcomes. It is worth investing time on learning to focus and be present better. In all of my work, you know this, Gaby, because we've talked about it quite a lot. In every aspect of my work, being present, getting better at being present, is the foundation from which everything grows. If you want to observe yourself, you've got to be present with yourself. If you want to have a conversation with someone where you really actually get the nuance of what they're saying, not just hear their words, you've got to be present with them. If you want to understand an environment in an office, shut your ideas down for a bit and open your ears and eyes and look and listen. Be present with what is. We were talking about, relationship. Relationship is based on presence. Communication is based on presence. Health is based on presence. So there are the two things that I would encourage you as lifelong shifts in your professional or personal life are worth an investment of your time. Even if it feels a bit cumbersome at the beginning, it becomes a habit. look at things from 360 degrees from those three domains, and be aware of what you're paying attention to. Choose to be present. We talked about doing less. People think, oh God, presence is something I've got to do. No, presence means doing less. My definition of presence is what you have when you're not distracted. If you have fewer distractions, you are more present. And I can guarantee that, because if there's a loud noise outside your room right now, you would be very, very present. All the distractions would go. You wouldn't care about what I was saying, whatever. You'd go, what's that? Presence. If I smelt gas now, which would be very strange because there isn't gas in the house, but if I smelt gas now, I would go, hold on, sorry, there's something I need to do, and I'd be gone. When distractions disappear, presence appears. So if you want to become more present, train yourself to be less distracted. Notice what you're paying attention to and be conscious about that. Those are my 2 suggestions for your month ahead, and I would love to know what lands for people and whether things echo and work for them.
Talking about distractions.
Did you get distracted, Gaby?
I'm multitasking.
Oh, you gotta love
I
it.
got some really good feedback I'm going to share with you. But before we go, I want people to know where they can find you. I want people to know where they can get your books. I have one of your books.
Which one do you have? Which one do you have?
Is it Self with Others?
Presence? Have you got the one on presence? Yeah, you've got presence. Okay.
So, okay. Yes, so let us know, put the links on here. Where can we find you? Where can they hear more from you? I know that these concepts are so easy, sound easy, but they're so complex, and then you're gonna have this mental battle. So you may even want to reach out to him. You do coaching as well. I highly, highly recommend reaching out, if not for anything else, just to learn from John, because I feel like a lot of us were blown away as usual. So where can we find you?
Well, I have a website, which is johnbritton.co. That's sort of the portal that you find me. It's not com, just co. That's the portal from which you find me. It's in need of redesign, and I'm currently trying to find the money to do the redesign, but it's still got the relevant information on. There's a few things there. You can find my books on Amazon. That's the easiest way to get them. There's a program called Hummingbird Wisdom, which is a 30-day email program where you sign up and you get 1 email a day. That's about becoming more focused, less distracted, more focused. It deals with presence and other things. There are also other free resources. You can find them on my website and so on. And yes, I offer coaching, either sort of short 3-session journeys or, the full 12, 18 session journeys. It's always a joy to coach people. Just reach out via the website, via my email, which is john@johnbritton.co. Just reach out and we can have a chat about something. I'm always, as you can tell, happy to chat. So just find me and talk to me. If you have any responses to what we've talked about today, it's always fascinating for me to hear, particularly when I'm talking to people who are coming from a field that's parallel to where we are now. And, you can always set up a free call with me. I do free calls with people, particularly if you're interested in a longer coaching program. We'll have a chat and so on. So just reach out, just be in touch.
You said that one time when I first heard you speak, and I did stay in touch, and it has been one of the many blessings I've had in my life. So thank you, and thank you for taking the time to be with us. and sharing your wisdom as usual, teaching us so much. If you happen to not get his website or whatever, he's on LinkedIn. So wherever you saw the post for this meetup, you can always click on his LinkedIn. He's very responsive, as most of the speakers, all of the speakers have had here. I like to bring people that will answer questions if you have them after the fact. So yeah, well then it's time. Now we got to go back and be functioning members of society.
Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. Just go out and be human. That'll be enough.
There you go. Let's just go and play and have fun. We'll do the rest later.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to all of you for spending the time and for the questions and comments. It's very interesting to me. So thank you.
And you guys can start jumping off. I need to. John, do you mind staying real quick?
Not at all.
Okay, have a couple. I want to share something with you before we go.
There we go.
Oh, there you go. Okay. I think. Okay, so I wanted to share this. One of our students, she said, I'm a little embarrassed to share, but wow, John's words really made me emotional when he talked about self-acceptance and accepting the things we don't like about ourselves, especially as a grad student, always being focused on what needs to be fixed about myself and what isn't, and feeling insufficient. The focus on negativity becomes a barrier to growth because it becomes a distraction. So I just thought I needed to share that with you. She sent it privately.
Lovely. Do encourage her if she would like to reach out. She can always set up a free call on my, via my website, or just drop me an email. I'm always willing to and happy just to make a little input to someone, because sometimes that can make a big difference for people. So
I will let her know. I've interacted with her in different spaces, so I'll reach out and let her know. But yes, all right.
I hope that was useful to you.